Okay, super cool. I think we are live. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to also look at LinkedIn and just kind of see if I could follow. Let's see. Okay, it didn't start on LinkedIn yet, but we are live. Welcome to Finding Your HR Advocacy Voice. My name is Tracy Justice. And oh, I didn't even put our display names. Let's put that up real quick. My name is Tracy
Okay.
Justice, and I am the host of Finding Your HR Advocacy Voice. And I have Chris Schrader, the Advocacy Pro, with me, who is also co-hosting the podcast as well. And we are excited to be here today. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much, Tracy.
Super cool. So much has happened since our last podcast. And so there's a few things that I kind of wanted to go through just to make sure that we cover everything within the hour. But before I do that, I always want to put on the
The
disclaimer.
disclaimer.
That's right. Just to make sure that everyone knows that this podcast is provided for community building and bringing awareness to public policy. We are not attorneys. However, we do volunteer within the SHRM space, and we just want to make sure that we let you know we're not attorneys. However, we do believe in advocating on HR policies that impact the work that we do. So, with that, one of the things that I wanted to first cover is I know that we had the in-district campaign that SHRM
Right.
held. And so just, we're not going to spend too much time on that. I did try to reach out to Jim Baird.
Mhm.
They did say that, they couldn't meet with us until October.
Right.
And I wanted to see if you had any updates that
Sure.
you wanted to add, and then
That,
we'd move on
yeah.
to the next thing.
So SHRM's in district campaign. It happens every year. Um, this is tied to Washington D.C.'s. Well, quite frankly, it's tied to their weather. So this goes back to before air conditioning. So I don't know if have you been to DC, Tracy?
Yeah, I've been to DC,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Very good. So you probably know then that Washington D.C. Was why it sits where it sits is because when the country, when the republic was established, rather, where the capital was going to be mattered a lot. And the people in the South didn't want it to be in New York. Everybody thought it had to be in New York or Philadelphia or something like that because those were the big cities and that's where it needed to be. And all the states were, that will give Pennsylvania too much sway, or that'll give New York too much sway. And so there was a big fight over where the capital could be. And
Mm-hmm.
so they had the Continental Congress and everything in Philadelphia, so it stayed there temporarily. Ultimately, what happened was that the states of Maryland and Virginia said, okay, we will be willing to give state land to this republic, right? Because now you have to have a capital, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
so we will donate land and we will literally hand it over. So it won't be Virginia anymore and it won't be Maryland anymore. It will be the District of Columbia, and that will be
Okay.
totally a federal piece.
Okay.
So now it's not much land because they expected the government to be small. So they didn't give a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of land. And they
Mm-hmm.
also gave the absolute worst land in both states because they were giving it away. So basically, the entire city is built on a swamp.
Huh.
And as a result, it became swampy, especially in the summertime where it would be insufferable humidity, mosquitoes as big as birds. You know, I mean,
Mm.
it was just terrible. There was no flood control for the Potomac, so the streets would turn to mud, and it was like the worst place where you could possibly be. Finally, they built the tidal basin where they put the Jefferson Memorial. Ultimately, that tidal basin is a flood control basin.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think, oh, it's a pretty giant water pond in front of this majestic
That's what I'm trying to
Jefferson Memorial.
remember.
No, it's not. It's a public works flood project. But anyway,
That
so
is interesting. Yes.
with nice cherry trees around it. So, but as a result, DC was just always miserable. And until air conditioning came along, August is just the worst.
Okay.
So everybody who could got out of town. And
Okay.
accordingly, this is the congressional recess. So basically, now the staff don't get to leave, but because you can't turn the lights out, right? So the
Yes,
staff all
yes.
stays.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
That is
Staff
really
stay,
interesting.
and the representatives go home. Now, in theory, they go back to their home districts, and this is where they're supposed to spend time.
Yes.
Going to Kroger's, go out on the hustings, shake hands, kiss
Yes, yes, yes.
babies, we do ribbon cuttings, things like this.
Yes,
All
yes.
things we normally do. However, they also have lives. And so a few of them would like to actually go on vacation because they don't get to do that, right? Very much at all. So, because they work insane hours, they just work really insane hours. And so they might come back to their district for a few minutes or whatnot, but they're just as likely to take a couple of weeks off with their kids before they go to school, right? I mean, they're like everybody else, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And so now they call it a district because what you can't say is, hey, I'm blowing town to go on vacation. Right? You can't say that.
Yes, so they're going home in district.
They're going
yes.
home. They're going home. They're going home to their district. And some number do, right? Some number do. And in election years,
yes,
more than not, because this is campaigning time, right?
Yes, yes.
You get a mix. So that's how an election year influenced things. So let's talk about the visits I was trying to get scheduled.
Okay.
I wanted to meet with both Senator Young and Senator Braun, and then my representative in my district, Aaron Houchins. I have good relationships with all three of those folks already, so that wasn't the issue. But timing was the first piece was I'm busy as heck, right?
It's a lot going on.
My daytime job is my consulting company, right?
Yes.
And so I am just super busy right now with client work, and that really constrained the time that I would have available to meet. And then it turned out that in talking to Senator Young's office, that he was really only going to be in his district office in Indianapolis for about 2 to 3 days at the most, really 2.5. And the rest of his time was going to be spent up north, where a couple of chip factories are being built. And he was the lead sponsor on the CHIPS Act.
Yes. He's very proud of that.
And he should be. I mean, most senators work their entire career and never get something like that done. I mean, so if I were him, I'd be taking bows too. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a rare accomplishment.
Okay.
Yeah. For something that you're the driver on to get done, that's something like that. I mean,
and bipartisan, right?
We are relocating microchip, basically fabrication and finishing and shipping, and moving it all back to the U.S. That's a strategic right to do that. So you usually don't get to do. You can spend your whole career and never get a swing at something like that. So if I were him, I'd be popping champagne corks now between.
Of course.
But anyway, as kind of
tricky this year.
He was actually physically going to be up north where those plants are being built, and he's meeting with those communities, and he's meeting with the companies that are building those chip plants and all that. So to me, perfect sense. Quite frankly, shocked he even spent any days
here.
Right?
Here.
So Senator Young did not go on vacation. Senator Braun was only going to be in his office like one day.
Yeah, he's campaigning right now.
He's campaigning for governor.
Yes.
He's campaigning for governor, so that was that. I don't begrudge him that, by the way.
No, of course. I know that we take
you're
advantage.
Sitting senator.
That's right.
Senator, and there's stuff getting done. There's only so many days that you can have to campaign, and so why wouldn't you take the ones during the recess to do it? I mean,
definitely.
I would, me in their shoes, do the same thing. So
yes.
Didn't think anything of it. And again, these are offices that I'm in contact with. I visit them when I'm in DC. This isn't like this is my only bite of the apple. It's okay.
Exactly.
Representative Houchin, I've got a good relationship with her office and her personally. Now she was in her office the whole time.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that's 2.5 hours from where I live, and equally unfortunately, my client work has taken me north. And so I was going to have to give up practically more than half a day just in drive time to meet with her and then turn around and go back. And I did not have a half a day in my schedule to do it. I just
Yeah.
didn't. Now, if her district office was in Bloomington, well,
that would have been a different story.
15 minutes for me, right?
Yes. Of course.
There we go. And back when Senator Young was Representative Young and he represented my district, his home office was in Bloomington because he lived in Bloomington. So,
yes.
So that's why those visits didn't go off. So I think the in-district visits during an election year is difficult for everybody.
Yes.
Because all the representatives are running for their job again.
Yes.
100% of them are.
Yes.
And 1/3 of the Senate is up for it, right?
Yes.
So these election year in-district visits are always going to be dicey in terms of availability to meet. So I'm a fan of them. And Representative Young, when he was representative, he actually came back quite frequently. I would say once a month. He was in the Bloomington office, maybe only a day, maybe only two, but he was there quite regularly.
He's very personable. I've interacted with him, and he's a personable person. You can easily speak to and ask questions for sure.
He takes public service serious as a heart attack. I mean, he really does. And I've just full disclosure, I've known him since I first started in this role. As a matter of fact, I met him back when he was on Senator Lugar's staff. He was the legislative assistant. He wasn't even the LD.
Wow.
He was a legislative assistant. And he had labor and health for Senator Lugar. So when I showed up to meet, I was like, well, who's the staffer in charge of labor and health? And they said, oh, we just got a guy. His name's Todd Young.
That is so cool.
So I've joked with him a couple of years ago that I think outside of his wife, I'm probably the only one who has every one of his business cards from the time he was a legislative assistant all the way up to when he was a senator.
That says a lot about your journey too, Chris. Like, wow. So
I get reminders that I'm old every once in a while.
So, come on. It's wisdom. Wisdom is a beautiful thing, right? Like not everybody gets to say they grow old. So I think that's beautiful.
So
But I do have a question then. So because I know the two talking points were to talk about the WIOA, the workforce development, as well as the workplace immigration. Is there anything to touch on for those two talking points?
Well, workplace immigration is going nowhere fast, largely because the leadership of the two parties in DC met months ago and agreed that they would not pick up any immigration stuff until after the election.
Oh, okay.
So that legislation is not moving and won't move because both parties agreed that it wouldn't. So
so that's
do we talk about it? Yes. As a matter of fact, I can tell you that talking immigration reform or immigrant process reform or anything touching immigration, I have talked about that just about every single time I've been to the Hill for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So there's always a piece of legislation. This is a standing issue for sure. And they're not going to give up. They're just not going to. And you don't give up on policy pegs, right?
No, you don't. You just have to keep going and keep, finding the best way to share that story.
Yeah, and once again, I will likely finish out my role as Director of Government Affairs, having spent the entirety of it and not having moved the ball an inch on immigration reform. It happens. You can spend 20 years at it and never get it done, right?
But we get some pieces done of it.
Nature of legislation. Well, everybody talks about pieces, but the reality of it is it's just as divisive and time consuming and expensive to pass a piece as it is the whole thing. And so that's why they keep on going for these overarching solutions, which probably warrant the fight. But then again, getting enough there that puts enough in there for everybody has proven historically to be daunting. So the WIOA is different, right? So WIOA reauthorization. So WIO was a program. This is a Workforce Innovation Act. It goes all the way back to Clinton.
Let's see.
I want to say Clinton, may have been Bush. But when
Oh,
WIOA
okay.
first came out, like most pieces of legislation, these kinds of funding and things like that, they're set up to run for some series of years and then they sunset. So
Okay.
unless they're reauthorized, they go away. Now, most government programs never ever go away, but usually if the Republicans have had a hand in shaping it, they always build in this piece where it dies if people don't reauthorize it again, because typically in their way of thinking is, the reason why we put this together, the reason why we structured this way may meet the demand that we have today for it, but 10 years from now may be a different thing. And so we want to be able to say, okay, this goes away and maybe something else is different or whatnot. But as a result, it's always a big fight to get it reauthorized, right?
Really?
Part of the challenge with funding mechanisms is once people figure out how to get the money and they know how to use the money, they really want to keep on getting that money. And so I'll use the state of Indiana as an example. What the WIOA does is basically hand a pile of money to the state of Indiana, and the state of Indiana uses it to fund workforce development and workforce innovation stuff in Indiana. And so it goes out in all kinds of different directions for all different programs, and it's federal money. So it's basically a federal check handed to the state, and the state's got to do that stuff. I mean, what the funding is for, it's got to do that, right? And then it has to report back to the federal government how it did it.
How it used it.
It's a heavily used program in Indiana. Indiana leverages it. So a short putt for me to advocate for it, right? So it has broad support, and it was built into a larger bill that would basically make it permanent. So you wouldn't be doing this dance every 5 or 6 years. So it was folded into a larger piece of legislation that has other components of workforce innovation and things like that are longer reaching, which I think was the right way to do it. You had to, as a standalone piece of legislation, it probably wouldn't have made it, but as part of a bigger piece, it would. So as a result, so that legislation, the House version of it, passed out of committee. I worked really hard on that bill because the committee it was in had 3 representatives from Indiana on it. So SHRM was really in close communication with me saying, hey, Chris, we really need these votes, right?
Because I think it's really important.
I didn't have to bend any arms really because Erin Houchins, remember I brought her up before, she was on the committee. Larry Bouchon from District 8 was on the committee, and Banks in 3 was on the committee. And these were all people. Banks I knew from the Indiana General Assembly, and Bouchon came into Congress the very first year that I started in this role.
Oh, wow.
So my visit to his office, he was brand new. He was literally brand new. I was brand new. He was brand new. Yeah. Which really made me think about things because he's retiring, right? So there's that seat is open this year. Yeah, it kind of worries me that everybody I've been working with is retiring. But anyway, I digress. So those were easy votes to get.
So what did SHRM really want? Did SHRM just wanted us to reinforce these talking points locally?
SHRM had to get, SHRM wanted the talking point because it's now out of committee, which means it's going to be on the floor.
Okay.
So it needs to be called for a vote. Now that hasn't happened yet. And we're running out of calendar, right? Because this Congress turns into a pumpkin, right, on December 31st. So we will have to go at it all over again and start with a new bill and get into committee and do all of that in the new Congress if it doesn't pass. And quite frankly, I don't see any path with the calendar left that it could pass the House, go to the Senate, get through committee, get out of committee, go to the Senate floor, get voted on, and have it signed by the president between now and December 31st. I don't see how
because there's a lot going on.
There's enough working days to get that done. Plus, once we hit October, once we hit September 15th, the House especially is in full freaking campaign mode.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So
is there,
I mean, there's a practical question of, do you have enough people in town to vote? Do you have a quorum?
wow. So is there anything, so do we have to worry about the YO as HR?
Okay. So let me frame this the right way. Right. So the fact that this has gotten out of committee and has gotten to the floor is a big deal. Is a really big deal. And it's bipartisan, truly bipartisan. I don't mean like 9 Republicans and 1 Democrat bipartisan. I mean bipartisan. Lots of Democrats, lots of Republicans.
Good.
So as a result, if they have to do this again and the committee composition remains similar in the House. Okay. So where this could run into trouble is if there is a change of power in the House. So if the Democrats took the House, it would be different. If the Republicans take the House, the committee composition probably remains very similar, in which case the legislation is introduced, gets assigned to the committee, and gets passed out lickety-split and sent to the floor for a vote, right? Because all this has already happened.
Yes.
So this is just like a do-over. Think about it that way. It's a do-over.
Okay, so just a do-over.
The way congressional sessions work, right? You have 2 years. And so anything that isn't passed all the way through and signed turns into a pumpkin, and you got to start all over.
Okay.
Which is part of things that ticks people off, right? But
there's
a reason for it. There's a reason for it. So anyway,
okay.
So I have if all things stay basically the same, if the Republicans hold the House, I would expect this thing to get through and get to the floor in the spring and be locked and loaded and ready to go to the Senate. And if the Republicans take the Senate, then I would feel very comfortable about that bill getting. So then what I would do would be to switch to the Senate Help Committee. Now, Senator Braun is HELP stands for Health, Education, Labor, and Pension. So that's where this bill would go. Sorry about that. I threw that acronym out and realized you didn't know what that was. I'm glad you gave me that look, because I forget that it's not obvious.
No, right? No, sorry. I didn't even mean, I was trying to process it in my brain. Like, do I know what that means? Okay.
Yeah. My acronyms, my experience get the better of me sometimes.
No, but that's super cool. Thank you.
So we'll go to Help Committee. So Senator Braun was on the Help Committee. So I was going to be the guy that SHRM was looking to persuade Senator Braun to vote for that bill. And I was very comfortable he would have questions. He always does. It's just the way he does. He's a CEO. CEOs always have questions, right?
Well, that's right.
No big deal. I like working with him. He's a guy that can be worked with, so I was fine. But he's running for governor, right?
Yes.
So, but the guy who's going to replace him is Banks.
Yes.
Who
and Banks was always part of the committee as well.
So if Banks, who is on the House version of the Senate, so in the House,
so when he moves to the Senate,
education, pension, labor, so it's ELP or EPL, something like that. Anyway, so if Banks says, "Hey, put me on that committee," which is analogous to the committee I was on in the House, so if that's what he wants, and the Republicans win the Senate, which means they get to pick. So if that's the case, then I feel really good about that, because that way, when it gets assigned to that committee, I'm built in with a guy I can work with that it will likely be more persuadable than not around that particular issue. And so I could see that thing actually getting done, and I could see that being signed by either president right now, either of these candidates, whoever. I can see either president signing that bill.
Okay, so then there's not a concern. So is there like a sunset though? Is there an actual period where we could possibly not be able to access the funds? Or is that
Yes. So when does WIOA turn into a pumpkin? I'm embarrassed to say I don't know.
Okay, no, that's okay.
I don't know. It may be the end of next year.
Oh wow. Okay, so then HR, because it seems like
it's not like this has to. I certainly wasn't portraying is this something we have to get done this year or bad things happen. I wasn't sending that message. So
no.
I'm embarrassed to say I don't recall. I did know.
Oh, don't be embarrassed.
I'm sure I knew at one point in time. It just fled my mind. But that's a great question to ask.
Okay,
right?
because I guess I'm trying to see if they
Yeah,
have
I'm
it here on
sure
their
next year is going
printouts,
to be
but I don't see it.
Auga, Auga, that probably
Because it
last
just
chance.
because especially with AI and technology and the workforce is changing, you would think that the WIOA is just perfect for
So, well, you got to
organizations.
remember again, WIOA is a federal funding program. So, what it
Mm-hmm.
means is Indiana is different than what it means in Kentucky, is different than what it means in Missouri.
Okay,
So, it's
okay,
up to the
okay.
states to figure out how they
How
will
it's being
do it.
okay.
Indiana is very aware of the items you brought up, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them pushing resources in that direction. But
Exactly.
to be very clear, it is federal money that goes to the states for their use for that purpose. Okay.
Okay. Federal
So
money.
we'll
Okay.
see. Like I said, the calendar is not conducive to getting it passed in this session of Congress,
Mm-hmm.
but
But
I'm actually feeling pretty good about getting
okay.
it done next time. I feel pretty good about that. We have to do it all over again, but I feel pretty good about getting it done.
Okay, super cool, super cool. So I'm looking
Yep.
at the time. So we did we last week we had the HR Indiana SHRM conference, which was like
Yes.
absolutely awesome. But didn't you say that you also presented, at
Yeah. So I do a government affairs update at every session, and I talked a little bit about the jobs numbers and stuff, and told them not to believe them very much. And of course, yesterday I think I don't know if you saw, but the
no,
Bureau of
tell
Labor
me.
Statistics came out and said that for January, February, and March, they were issuing a correction, and so they were only off by 600,000 jobs. Which means that basically the jobs reports were bull for 3 months, and the actual job creation is probably only around 50,000 in the last 3 months.
Is that good or bad? What's the
That's
benchmark?
bad. No, that's
That's
really
bad.
really bad.
Okay.
That
Oh, that's
well
very bad.
well
And
that
so
bad in comparison to what they thought it was.
worse than what they
Oh,
thought it
far
was.
worse. I mean, that's why.
Oh,
Yeah, basically, I wrote a long LinkedIn article on this, but basically,
oh, okay.
what I believe has happened is that I first of all, I don't believe the government's cooking the books. I see that on Twitter and
And what do you mean by that when you say the government are cooking? Like, 'cause some
uh,
people
they're
think that
they're
the government's
they
lying.
are putting out favorable numbers on job creation to be supportive to the Democrats. I don't believe that's
Oh,
happening.
okay.
These people are quants. These are wonks who work at the BLS and don't give a rip who's in charge. I mean, to them, it's just
Hmm.
numbers, right? So I think what has happened is that their data collection instruments that have been around, well, 2/3 of the components have been around since the Great Depression, and 1/3 hasn't. So basically, until Bill Clinton, until the 90s, they basically relied on two things. What was called the Establishment Survey,
Okay.
which was information they gathered from companies who provide hiring data on a voluntary basis.
Hmm.
And so that was one measure, and they did what was called a
Okay.
household survey. Household survey is pretty much what it sounds like. They would call households and say, okay, do you have a minute? From Bureau of Labor Statistics, how many adults are in the household? How many are working?
Okay.
Just a handful of questions, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so they kind of use that because you would kind of expect the household survey to somewhat be in concert with the establishment survey. So
Uh-huh.
you said you had people who worked for you, that
Yes.
they were working for you, and you reported that, and then the Bureau of Labor Statistics called one of your people's household and they say, yeah, I'm working, not for you,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I'm working, that those two things would jive.
Oh,
So
so
if
but
you said they were working and they were saying, hell, I'm not working, well, something's not right.
mm-hmm.
So that's called a balance. So you always have to have a balance when you're gathering data. You also have to have another measure that tells you your other data is likely accurate.
Yes, yes,
So
yes,
in
yes, yes.
statistical terms, that's called a balance.
Okay.
VALANCE, right? So I hope I'm not giving bad statistics flashbacks
No,
to
no, no, no. That's
in
okay.
college to anybody who's listening to this, but be as it may. So that's what they did. And then in the 90s, they realized the economy. Remember in the 90s, the economy was just roaring. I mean, it was just
Okay.
growing at just a staggering rate. You know, we were doing like 3.4, 3.5,
Oh, really? Okay.
GDP.
Those were my teen years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they weren't mine, but I was actually hiring during then, and you couldn't hire people fast enough. If they had a pulse, you hired them. That's where it's college graduates getting signing bonuses for years, right? Just right out of school, just to take a job. So the jobs report that comes out isn't actually really the jobs created, right? It's
Okay.
a projection. It's a projection of that.
Okay.
And because you don't really know the reality of it until much later. Okay.
Yes.
And that's why they do revisions. So when they really know, then they revise up or down whatever they said it was. Okay. So it's a projection. Unfortunately, the news media treats these things like gospel. And so way too overwrought, putting way too much trust in these numbers because they're projections. So in the 90s, and the problem with the numbers too is that they're backward looking, not forward looking. Okay.
Yeah, because you can't. Yeah.
So not
Lagging
as mature as you would like, but they don't tell you anything about the future. And of course, Wall Street and everybody else is more interested in where things pointed than where things are. What's the trajectory?
Okay.
So
yes.
So the Clinton administration said, okay, we got to fix this piece, right, for the street. And so they came up with what's called the birth-death model. And so what the birth-death model was supposed to do. So the BLS knows, like if they report jobs for the last month, and that's a guess, man, that is a guess. And so that's what you've been doing. So that's a guess. But if you report them for the month of June, you also know what happened in June is some number of new companies were created and hired people. And you don't know who they are because they're not in establishment survey. They're not in ADP because they're not big enough to pay ADP's fees. They're not in Ceridian, so they're not going to be in any of that. But they're there. They're there. And that happened. New companies started. And some number of companies also died, and those people lost their jobs. Birth, death. Get it? Birth, death.
Yes.
Of a company, not people. Birth, death. So there was like some number of that happened. And so they built a model that basically looks back 7 years and extrapolates out and throws forward that activity.
Oh.
So those three things are added together. Now, way back in the 90s, the establishment survey was robust. I participated in it. I've always participated in the establishment survey because I use BLS data. And so I always felt, data, I should be a contributor. I should be a freeloader. So I said, okay, I'll participate. And so I was in that number, right? My company was in that number, and I work with BLS, and they said, okay, we want to track these 5 jobs with you. And so every month, send us this data. I'm like, fine, I did. So no big deal. So way back in the 90s, the number of companies that participated in that, and it's voluntary, okay? So the number of companies that participated in it was robust and represented all kinds of different industries, was spread out across the country, all the good stuff you want, right? And within that, the number of people who actually sent their data. So it's one thing to say, I'll help. It's another thing to actually do it.
Yes, and follow through.
Correct. And so the follow through was always around 75%, really high, but they're volunteer. I mean, they held up their hands.
That's high.
You kind of expect a higher, you expect a higher level participation. If I said I'd do it, I'll do it, right? So cool, good. I can trust that, right? Now, whether I'm weighting it the right way or whether it tells me what I think it tells me, these are analytical things, right? But in turn, I'm talking about the robustness of the data.
Yes.
The robustness of the data. And then a remarkably high number of people actually picked up the phone and answered those questions.
Yeah, because it's not today. Not today.
Well, okay, here's the problem. So starting in the mid 2000s, the people who were holding up their hands and say, I'll participate, really started to drop. And it just kind of kept on falling and falling and falling and falling. And of the people who were in it, the number who really provided data started falling and falling and falling, right? So,
Okay.
so it starts drifting down. Now, not to the point where you'd say, okay, it invalidates the whole thing, but it was falling. It wasn't growing. It wasn't stabilizing. It was
It
dropping.
was just going down. Okay.
And then what had happened by that point in the 2000s is everybody and their dog had a cell phone. And so the landline started going away.
Yes.
What did the federal government call the landline?
What did they call it?
The landline. The
landline.
Yeah,
Yes,
the
yes,
landline that comes into your house.
yes,
the
yes,
one
yes.
nobody
The
has
landline
anymore,
phones.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. So everybody moves to mobile phones, and so so BLS realized this, and so in the late 2000, or sorry, in I want to think when it was. It was just like 2 years before COVID, I think. They
Okay.
finally said, we're going to call mobile phones. But the problem with that is that the mobile carriers, because the Department of Labor is so big and the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a piece of that.
Uh-huh.
Well, these are coming through large volume exchanges, right?
Mhm.
That are trafficking the calls. And so consequently, when the BLS calls you, 99% of the time, what shows up on your phone is unknown number.
Mhm.
How many people answer an unknown number call?
I know.
Nobody.
Yeah, right.
So
Unknown, you will say unknown. Thank you.
So some people will pick it up, but most will not.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
so the household survey fell apart. The establishment survey fell apart. And then this spreadsheet model, which used to only affect about 15% of the whole number, now represents over 50% of the number.
So spreadsheet
because
model.
the data degraded. The birth-death model. The birth-death model is a freaking spreadsheet. It's an algorithm. It spits out a number based on the last 7 years and cranks that and extrapolates that out to what they think happened.
Yeah,
now,
that's not.
When the other data was coming in that was so robust, when you looked at the weighted percentage of what that birth-death model did, it was only affecting about 10% of the number, which they were fine with because it was meant to be additive. It was meant to add an additional layer of clarity.
Yes.
It was never meant to represent
Tell the whole story,
the whole number, because it's just a plug. It's a spreadsheet formula. It's not actual jobs. It's not even a spreadsheet formula. Well, if you're the Department of Labor Statistics, what are you going to do? Because all these are voluntary systems. You can't make people pick up the phone. You can't require. Now, there are surveys where the government can require you to do this, and these are census related. So the federal government has a lot of power to extract census data from you.
To do that, but they only do it a certain amount of times.
No, with employers, they do it annually. So that's called the
through the ADP, through the payroll.
So if you're one of those companies who the government points at and says, so if you're providing QECW data, which is actual census data, it comes out once a year, then that's mandatory. That's no, hey, thanks for playing. That you're a nice guy.
So they use that information to
No, they don't. No, because so that's historical data, that's real data, but again, it's dated information. So it's reality from like 12 months ago.
Okay.
So what's basically been happening, and so the QECW that has come out, the most recent one's going to come out, it's going to lay the whole house of cards bare. Basically, the jobs reporting that you hear on the news, everything that you hear, that system, in my analysis, is fundamentally broken, and I don't believe a damn thing that comes out of it.
Okay, so then,
and you know it's not working, and you know it's not working because every single adjustment they make is only down, not up.
So then that means that they're just trying to tread slowly and not really.
So you hear in the news, and I heard it. Candidate or Vice President Harris actually repeated this I saw her on TV, and she goes, "We created 175,000 jobs last month." Here's the one thing I know for sure: That didn't happen. I don't know what the number is, but it ain't that.
Because the system or the
It's
algorithm
going to
that's
be,
currently in place is not really efficient. Yes. So
nobody at BLS is cheating. Nobody's not doing their job. No, it's none of that stuff. Their collection methodology has broken for a whole lot of reasons that are not their fault. And by the way, the establishment survey participation rate, when COVID hit, it died. And when we came back to work, hardly anybody came back. So their data quality has eroded. So their quality has eroded. Their volume has eroded. And now their spreadsheet algo is driving the train with all the predictability you could have of where that would land, which is not accurate because it's a guess. It's a projection. It's based on historical data extrapolated forward and in some methodology they built for that. So again, this doesn't make people evil. The government isn't stupid. I'm not saying
no. It's just they're using the systems that have been in place. And but
so this is what I'm basically saying. You as HR pro should know.
Yes.
If you were kind of looking at that to tell you anything, to give you an idea of, hey, oh my gosh, all these jobs are open. I mean, my gosh, we have.
You're like, where are they?
This is why people are saying, how could there be all these new jobs when I haven't been able to find a job for 2 months?
Because I've heard that a lot. Yes. Because it's, so that really does help. So that helps HR pros to really think about when they see those numbers. May not
how we used to be able to rely upon them. It used to be reliable.
Part of our metrics.
I would look at these metrics and say, these are solid. This informs me. And when they made revisions, right? When they made revisions, they were on the upside usually, which is what you would expect, right? Because early numbers are never quite accurate. And when the economy is moving along, all the adjustments are going to be on the upside, not on the upside.
But it's going down. So that's
everything has been a negative correction for 3.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Negative correction every single time. That is how you know it's broken.
Oh, wow. You know what? And it's just really, and I think that's why I really do love when we talk about these different nuances that happen within the policy.
And this affects policy in DC. This affects Jerome Powell, when he goes out and talks about interest rates and all that. What did he do? He went out and he mentioned that job growth seemed to be slowing. Job growth isn't slowing. It came to a grinding halt in October of 2023. Come on.
Oh, wow. So then,
but again, he is referring to those numbers, which kind of ticked me off because you can't tell if he's head of the Fed. And he put it this way: if I know it's broken and he doesn't, we got real problems. And he knows it's broken.
He probably doesn't, but if there isn't a new process,
now, he can't say publicly. He clearly can't say publicly.
No, definitely. So
I can do
even
that.
from our last podcast,
I don't bear responsibility for saying it's broken, but he does.
But even Chris, when we talked like at our on our last podcast, when people were talking about Biden and saying, he should quit, he should,
I know.
move over, and some of the things that you had said in that podcast was that, strategically, nobody else would be able to have access to that money besides Kamala. She would be the only one who would be able to have access to that money. So if that were to happen, she would be the only logical.
Right.
And it just shows that, when you understand the nuances or the underlying, things that influence the way that decisions are made, then you can kind of predict what's going to happen.
It allows you to be effective, right? Because you can take that intelligence and then you can then use it, use that knowledge to persuade in the right arena. Because I look forward to give me indication is who should I talk to and about what?
Yes.
That in advocacy, that's the thing. Who should I talk to and about what?
Who should I
all
talk
that
to
information
and
I
about
track,
what?
everything I study, everything I watch, everything I read is to get me to that point. Which, by the way, and we've said this before on this podcast, I'm not saying that you need to do everything I do to be effective as an advocate.
That's right. Yeah.
Quite to the contrary. You could do 5% of it and still be effective.
Yes, and that's why it's called finding your HR advocacy voice, right? Because we all have different skill sets and we have to play to those, but we have to understand what is it that, do we understand, the public policy? Do we understand how it's going to impact the way that we do the work that we do. And then it goes back to your, okay, so then if it's going to impact the work that I do, who should I talk to and about what? Like,
Right.
how
Well, you
exactly
can
do I,
also utilize your own strengths on it. I mean, I just happen to
Yes.
be an intellectual, I happen to be an analytical
Mm-hmm.
person who loves pulling that kind of data apart and seeing where it goes or whatnot.
Yes.
So
And I
it's
love hearing it.
natural and easy for me. So I leverage that. Other
Yes.
people might be policy wonks and excel at reading regulation and excel at reading law and then can leverage that. And so there's a lot of components that go into advocacy. And
Yes.
you don't have to, nobody has to do it the way I do it. Nobody has to do the way you do it. You know what
That's
I mean?
right.
Yeah.
Just do it. Get involved. Get
Just do it,
involved.
get
Don't let,
involved,
yes,
leverage your strengths, understand what's going
that's
on.
right.
But I did
Do
want
not
to talk
let,
a little bit here in the time
yes,
we have left,
I do.
because we
We
only got
have
about
15
15 minutes.
minutes left. I would
So,
love to talk about
yeah,
the
so one of the things I talked about,
Harris,
I'm sorry, what did you say?
with the Harris, because you said that,
Yes, I
we
did.
need to
So
talk
actually, I
about
want to
what
talk
her,
about, yeah,
go
I
ahead.
want to talk about both the Harris campaigns and the Trump campaigns. So when I did my
Okay.
presentation at state conference, one of the things I did was say, okay, of the two campaigns, what are their policy positions that have call outs or implications for HR?
Okay.
So I did one, and that was for Trump, and then I did one for Harris, and it was nothing because there was nothing until just a
At
couple
that
of
point.
days ago. So for Trump, and his have been out since May or June. He's had his on his site for months.
Yeah.
Months.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me. So the two things he has that would have impact on us or our companies is no tax on tips. So anybody
Oh, okay.
that,
I've heard a lot about that. Okay. No tax
so
on
anybody
tips.
that's in that, which is ironic because totally ironic in two areas. First, there was only a law passed around that recently to force employers to capture tips so that they could be taxed. And that was the Biden administration got that passed, and Kamala Harris who passed the deciding vote. Which was interesting because she's said no tax on tips when she was the one that cast the deciding vote. So it's kind of interesting when she said that at the time. I did a double take. I was like, "Whoa!"
Oh, goodness gracious.
But anyway,
okay. Okay. That what? Okay.
I digress. So she happens to be for that too. That's a separate issue. So but at the time she wasn't. So now she is, but she wasn't at the time. And so I didn't talk about it at conference. So the implication of that would be if that happened, then that law would be set aside.
Okay.
Now, how Trump would accomplish that, he is unclear. I'm unclear on because there's a piece of law there. So there's some work that would have to be done. Right?
And it was just recently passed. Is that what you said? You said there was a law that was recently passed that said, we need to capture all of, all the waiters' tips.
2 years ago.
So then we can tax it.
Yeah. And that was
I feel like I do recall it now.
And to the Biden administration's credit, remember they did a ton of spending, right?
Yeah.
So we had the blowout COVID thing where everybody got checked,
the PPP,
and then
everybody got money.
Came in and did even more money than that, and shoved more out the door, and that was part of the revenue. Part of the pay for that was capturing this revenue.
Capture money. Okay.
And so what they did is, and they put the employers on the hook for it, right?
Oh,
they put the employers on the hook for it. So so that's when you. And of course, it worked well because more people pay by credit cards now. I can't tell you the last time I saw money. I saw someone throw actual currency on the table or at a bar or anything. I just never see that. It's not
really.
And so therefore the employers just they capture that data, and so it becomes taxable income. That's really what it was. It was taxable.
Yeah.
It wasn't a tax on the employer. It was the employer's responsibility to
make sure
the income.
And
right. So that it could be taxed.
Yeah. I'm not going to open up because that one just makes me. Yeah.
But anyway, so he would have to undo that. So that was his position, right? So that would be an impact on some number of HR pros, right, who work for companies that do that. Yes. And the second one was his pledge to not reduce Social Security benefits, nor to increase the age for total for full eligibility for full benefits, right? So he
Okay.
says, I'm not going to increase the age, which is what
Uh-huh.
Congress has always done. And I'm not going to reduce the benefit, which Congress has sometimes done. Okay.
Okay. And this
Not,
is on
yeah,
Trump's
this is on
Trump's.
Trump's. Now,
Okay.
the call out to that is the reason that's a big deal is the only way, therefore, that you can fix Social Security, because it turns into a pumpkin in 2030. 2030.
2030. It turns into a
2030.
pumpkin. Yay for me. Okay, go ahead.
So when I, by the way, when I say turn into a pumpkin, I mean goes upside down on.
Yeah, no, and then
So,
you
so
know, then
anyway,
it's
the
going to
trust
be a
fund,
hot topic.
the mythical trust fund. So anyway, so the only thing therefore it's left is taxation. So you would have to increase Social Security taxes. And when you increase Social Security taxes, you increase the taxes both on the employer and the employee. Remember, that's a matching contribution
Yeah,
fund.
that's a matching.
So that would mean more taxes. So the implications of him ruling those two things out means more taxes. Now, what he would argue, and I would expect him to argue, is no, I'm going to blow the employment number out. There's going to be jobs galore. So we're going to collect plenty of tax. We won't even have to do that. We'll have so many more people contributing that it will fix itself.
Okay.
I
Okay.
expect that to be his response to that.
Because so just to make sure that I followed what you just said correctly. So you're saying that sometimes, you know, we'll increase the Social Security
every time,
not even sometimes. So every time, and that's how we get our extra
Congress
revenue.
has found itself in this box, and it's found itself in this box 3 or 4 times since it was created.
Okay.
So every time this has happened, they have done they've done at least 2 things. They have increased the Social Security age. So it was at 65.
Yes, that's true.
So the last time around, they took it to 67. And so now, and for people after that, it gets out further and tops out, I think, at 69 right now. So like I am 66 and 10 months for me, right? And my wife, I think, is 67 and 1 month. She's younger than me. So again, they stretched out the years when you could get the full benefit. Now you can still claim at 62, but you get a huge haircut, right?
Yeah.
A permanent haircut at that, a permanent haircut. So, so that would, the implication of that is people would likely stay in the workforce longer, which if you look at our birth rates,
people are going to end up staying.
We're going to need them to. You know, Greece went to a 6-day work week for a reason, right? So, there's that. So they've pushed out how far you would have to, how old you would have to be in order to collect the money, and
goodness gracious.
And then they've also pushed out the age. And then they also increase the tax. So those are the 2 things they have historically done. Okay.
So if
just
we don't do that,
they love kicking the can.
So if Trump doesn't do that, so people are going to be so the concern against that is that then where are we going to get the money?
The only thing left is taxes. So you're going to have to drive revenue in. Now, if you don't grow the workforce, you have to tax the existing workforce quite a bit. Right.
Wow. Okay. So then what's Kamala's stance on these? Because we got about
I haven't seen anything from her on Social Security yet. I'm sure that's coming. I mean, let's face it, you know, she had to stand up a campaign from a cold start with only 80 days to do it. So unsurprised.
Yeah.
You know, because she's got to come out with her own policies, not the Biden policies, her own policy, which is kind of hard because she's in the Biden administration. I can't express enough how hard it is for her to try to carve out space when you're the incumbent. I mean, you're not the incumbent. You aren't the president, but you're the vice president.
And you're kind of coming in with, Yeah, but I know that, I hear that she is trying to distance herself, or I'm
But it's
hearing in the news
hard
that she's trying to
because
distance herself
it's
from
hard to
his
do that,
economics, Biden's, and
Yeah. So I keep on seeing this every time she comes out and says, "I'm going to do this, this, and this." You see on social media right away. Well, what's been holding you back? You've been there for 3 years. What was holding you back? Why? And you have 18 months left yet. Why do you want me to wait for what you could start doing now? So I
really,
mean,
so
it's
is it really like, so
extremely
she really could be
uncomfortable.
doing stuff now?
Well, I don't know, but what I'm
Okay.
saying is that's the stuff that's being thrown back
That's
in her
being
face.
said. Okay, because I guess that's when I hear that I'm confused.
Yeah, well, because why aren't you doing this now? If it's so important, to get done, if it would make such a difference to the country, why aren't you doing it now? You're sitting in the seat. Why isn't this getting done now? Why do I have to wait till next year?
So then ask you this just to make sure I understand. So, because if she's the vice president, he's the president. Sometimes you have leaders that have one way that they're going to do things, and
Yeah, I
yeah.
know, but he isn't sitting there repudiating her
Oh, so then
campaign.
he
So
could.
this is
Okay.
this is what I'm saying. This is I can't express enough how hard it is to try to run the type of campaign she's trying to run with only 80 days to do it.
Wow.
I mean, the whole thing, it's asking the impossible. It really is just asking the impossible, but leave that aside.
Yeah.
Leave that aside. You put it this way, Tracy. If you came to me and said, "Hey, Chris, you're a campaign consultant. Here's the deal. You have to run a campaign from flesh start, stand up and build a party plank and build it in such a way that it doesn't repudiate your boss." Oh yeah, I forgot to say, you're the vice president and you need to do this in 80 days.
Yes,
you have
that's
money.
A lot.
You have money, but you have to get it done in 80 days and you have to win. Oh, and by the way, the administration that you're representing has been underwater in the polls to the other guy since last year. And I would tell you, there isn't enough money on the planet for me to take that job.
No. I wouldn't either, because I'd be like,
what I mean?
No.
So
Yeah, that's a lot of stress.
When you look at it that way,
yes,
I wouldn't wish this job on anybody, but be as it may, so she has started to come out with stuff, right?
Okay.
So she started to come out with stuff. So the first thing she ran out with was price controls on grocery items, right? Details yet to come, like which grocery items. Do you have specific few in mind? Is it all of them? What is it, right? And so immediately anybody who had been through price controls in the 70s, right? Because President Nixon did price controls on gas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it dropped the price of gas and then it dropped the availability of gas. So because when you have to sell it for less than you have to pay to get it, you don't have enough money.
Well, then, yes, of course. That makes sense. Okay. So then that happened.
So, but she's out with that. She's out with that. And she's got a variation on it. But that doesn't really affect HR except from this standpoint. So you may remember on the podcast, we've talked quite a few times about how the cost of living is having a massive impact on our employees, because we'll look at it this way. If you look at just a basket of groceries from Walmart, which is the cheapest of the cheap, and let's say that half that market basket is Walmart generic. So now you're really going cheapest. You only buy like half of this brand name, but you get it at Walmart, half of this brand name. Over the last 2 years, that same market basket of items, and let's just say it's bread, milk, cheese, eggs, usual stuff. That's up 75%. Wages are not up 75% in the last 2 years. But those things are up 75% in the last 2 years. So there's a whole
somebody walking in your office.
Now,
75% raise.
So if you're on the Republican side of the fence, what Republicans are saying, well, of course they are. You printed too much currency. You screwed around with energy. Energy costs went up. All of that goes into the supply chain for food. And the currency got devalued as a result of printing it out the bazoo. So what else did you expect? That's the Republican. Okay, so the Republican says that. What the Democrat says is None of that mattered, or if it mattered only a little bit. What this is really about is corporate greed. This is price gouging. So that's how.
Okay, so that's
That's how how vice president, I should say. Sorry, she is a candidate, but she's vice president.
So that's how.
Didn't mean to, throw any shade. She's referring to it as price gouging. So she's going to go after these corporations for price gouging.
Okay, because that's the reason why our groceries have gone up 75%.
Right, because it's just greed. It's just total greed. And then, and the grocers now are pushing back. So they're like, yeah, us with our whopping 2% profit margin.
Yeah, because I remember we went over that.
And by the way, if we were going to be, if we're greedy now, why weren't we before?
Yeah, because 2%, like grocery business does not seem like a lucrative.
If we could have been greedy before, what stopped us? Yeah. So,
yeah, that's not a lucrative to me. I don't know, but
Yeah, so you've got all these moving pieces here. So I haven't really seen, again, Vice President Harris's campaign is a work in progress because she's had like 5 minutes. Okay, we got to remember this. In the time between our last podcast, she became the nominee. Think about that.
Yes,
okay?
Yes.
Just one podcast ago, we were talking about Trump running against President Biden.
Yes.
So you will not catch me throwing any shade on the Harris campaign for not having as robust and built out a policy position across a whole host of issues and some of those will affect HR. There are big blanks because they're making it up as they go. And I don't mean that as sloppy.
No, 80 days.
They've been at it for 5 minutes.
Yes, totally agree.
So there's just going to be blank spots for a while. When we do our next podcast, when is our next podcast?
Yes, and that's what I was pulling up actually.
Wednesday.
So it'll be September, is it the 11th? Yes, the 11th.
So by September 11th, we will have, I would expect to see the Harris campaign have some stuff built out. Now, will they be really deep on it? Is it deeply thought through? Is it harmonized? Is it? No.
Yeah, and that's understandable. Like,
right. Because and Trump's is in the main. Now, Trump's policy reflects who he is. And he's the kind of guy that sets objectives and then figures out what to do. And then when you say, okay, how are you going to do it? Oh, I'm going to do it. But how? Oh, it's going to get done. I heard you. How? It will. I mean,
you know what? I can't even, I'm laughing about that.
I'm going to make a deal.
Sometimes that could be my personality where it's just like, we're going to get it done. How? Don't worry about like how right now. I'll figure it out. But that's the end. So no, I can totally even understand that part too.
I don't want to make it sound like his are these highly polished, think tank vetted policies that are harmonized and mutually supporting.
Just had more time. He had more time to get his together.
He had more time, and I will say this because he was president before, so
and true.
I kind of look at his and say it's a wish list. Some of it's going to get done, some of it's not. Some of it will be done in a way that not exactly what he wanted, but he cut a deal because that's what he does. He cuts deals. So
yes.
It's some version of that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it won't. And in any event, he will say it's all fabulous. So, right. I mean, that's how he rolls. That's what he does. It's just, this is beautiful. This is exactly what I wanted. So both of them are not, here's the other thing. Neither one of them will reflect, his doesn't and hers won't reflect traditional establishment planks. Both are populist. His is populist and hers is going to be populist.
Okay.
Because both parties are in the process of their establishments being dismantled and the power going to the populist wings of the party. The Republicans are just ahead of the curve. That's all. The Democrats are coming there. You know,
You,
if you want to see who's going to be the big voice next
uh-huh,
to the wheel, the person who's going to be driving the bus on the left, the loudest voice on the Democrat side,
uh-huh,
who's going to be having great influence over how those policies are set up, is going
uh-huh.
to be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Why, I know we're at like 5 minutes afterwards, but why did you say that? Like, because I feel like she's been
She's
quiet.
she's the coming thing. Did you see her
Okay.
speech at the DNC?
You know what? No, I did not.
Fine,
So,
look it up on YouTube. It's on YouTube.
okay.
Look it up.
Okay.
Look it
Okay.
up.
So then I'll listen to it. Okay.
She's the coming thing.
Okay.
She's the
And
coming
you know
thing.
what?
JD Vance, the coming thing. Like I said, the Republicans are just ahead of the curve. That's all.
Okay. I love that.
I don't know if ever in my life if I've said out loud the Republicans are ahead of the curve, but on this one they are.
Well, you know what? And it's funny that you said that because I think that in so far with as much time that I've been putting into this, I would say that, yeah, when you look at how government has been set up, I think the Republicans are behind and the Democrats are a little bit more established and a little bit more stronger when it comes to the government setup, of course, right?
Oh, the
Makes more
government
sense.
setup for sure. What I'm talking
Yes.
about is the party power.
Party
And
power.
yeah, because you got to policy ends up being law, right? You got to remember that.
Yeah.
This is the whole point we're talking
Yeah,
about. Here, right? This
oh,
eventually gets actualized in law, and within government, people are policy. People are policy. And this is one of the things I talked. This is you earlier today. We were talking about the event that's coming up with
yes,
HR.
coming up November. Oh, yes, we definitely need it. Yeah.
You heard me say last time around when the Biden administration came in, they got rid of and immediately ran out the heads of the EOC and the heads of the NLRB and installed their own people on day one.
That's
on
right.
day one. How it's been done since those agencies were created was that actually took a year because they didn't want disruption in labor. So it said, okay, we're just not going to change policy willy-nilly. So we're going to have a year gap here. So you party taking power, you're going to get your turn, but we're just not going to whipsaw anything. It's going to be a year so that businesses have an opportunity to acclimate.
Yes.
The Biden administration came in and said, to heck with that. Right. And so if Trump wins the presidency, do you think he will hesitate for a nanosecond now that that's now how the game is being played? Do you think he'll hesitate for a nanosecond to remove the head of the NLRB and the EOC and install his own people?
And that just really impacts HR a lot because we just don't
the
know.
NLRB
Yeah.
And the EOC, good God. I mean,
oh my gosh.
These people are in our kitchen all the time, right? So yeah, so that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Wow, this is a huge deal. And so after this, I'm definitely going to look up I said her name wrong.
Alexandria
Ocasio
Cortez.
Cortez. Okay.
And it's spelled phonetically.
Okay.
So just like it sounds.
Okay, so I'm definitely gonna I'm gonna listen to that so then I can bring the pieces together what you're saying here and now and then watch her video and then kind of see like what you mean about this populace and how the Republicans are ahead of the curve when it comes to this sort of power. It seems like that's what you're saying. Like they're bringing this power dynamic.
We're in the middle of power shift, and these establishment people are also, and I don't mean this to be cruel, but they are literally dying.
Ooh.
Nancy Pelosi's what, 90 odd? What do we got in the Senate with Senate Majority Leader? Right?
Yes. Alice has been watching.
Thanks
you so much, Alice. Yeah. And she said thank you. So I definitely want to give her a shout out.
Majority Leader McConnell, he's in his 90s. I mean, all these people are in their 90s.
I mean, it's about time to change. That's why I think it's just so important for HR professionals, especially since I feel like even HR professionals, our job is pretty much evolving and we've got to kind of think about how to react to the way that the workforce
because that's my whole point in this. Yes. What I'm trying to illustrate is give an idea of the operating environment we're in, where stuff is headed, and we've got to be aware of the things that can impact us. Right, because that you as I said it in our very first podcast, when it comes to public policy, when it comes to things like we're talking about, you're either at the table or you're on the table, and I don't want HR to be on the table.
No, especially with a lot of talks. I mean,
Yep.
but Chris and for anyone watching, Chris and I can go on forever. And
Yeah, we got to go. All right.
yes. So,
Yeah,
but
ran past our sell by. So yeah.
no, but
Okay.
this is really awesome. So I look forward to September 11th. I'm going to try to get some of this, some of our clips out, do a little bit better job of that. So we're going to see what that looks like. But,
good deal.
until next time, I'm going to put out hold on, before you jump off, Chris, hold on, let me put the feedback thing on. Okay. So thank you so much for joining. We hope you've learned something new. We appreciate your feedback, and definitely share your feedback with us. Until next time, bye.